Japanese Journey, Episode 1. So, yeah, today I just wanted to talk about a few things related to language learning, or more specifically, Japanese learning. So I'll just jump straight into it. Yeah, the first one is consistency. So, this is actually what I struggle with the most. So, I've been learning, I suppose, seriously-ish from December 2024. And I still don't think I'm doing enough. In fact, no, I'm certain I'm not doing enough. I haven't had 1 week where I've consistently done, 2 hours of study a day, and I've planned that study. I kind of just coast. I find myself doing the types of learning which are kind of easy and a bit passive, but I suppose I can go into more detail on that. But yeah, no, I think part of the purpose of me doing this is for me to have a point of reference and be able to look back and see how I'm progressing. And I might do like a weekly review of what I've planned and what I actually ended up doing, so I can kind of tweak my learning process as time goes on. So yeah, I think that's probably a fun way to do it. Yes, so skipping on from consistency, the next one for me is learning method, which I think ties in, because if you don't really enjoy the learning method, then you're not going to be consistent unless you just have a very strong will to get the result. But for me, I'm usually, if I really don't enjoy the learning method that much, I'm just not going to do it. For example, I saw a lot of recommendations to try the Genki course, and I did try it. I think I did about, I think I'm partway through chapter 3, perhaps. Did a couple of chapters, but yeah, I just found it way too boring. I didn't find it interested, and I didn't really think it was helping me that much, really, to be honest. I did find another course, actually, funny enough, called the colloquial course that I started initially. But the reason I dropped that was because it was written in Romanji, most of it anyway. And at the time, I had just learnt hiragana and katakana, and I wanted to kind of like solidify that knowledge. So I wanted to make sure I was using it. Now that I've done that, I might go back to that course at some point. But I find myself kind of just more focusing on things that I'm interested in. So, for example, I'm quite interested in verbs at the moment, because I find that if I understand, if I hear a verb that I know, I kind of have an idea of what's going on. So, yeah, I'm going to war with 60 verbs at the moment, and I suppose, just trying to figure out the best way for me to learn words. So that's interesting, and that was a very bad jump there by me on Crash Bandicoot. But yeah, learning methods. The long short of it for me is, it doesn't have to be like overly fun, because no pain, no gain. But I think, I just think it can't be too boring. At least for me, anyway. That's my current position. The next thing I wanted to talk about was pace. So you go on YouTube and you look at language learning, and like pretty much all you see is I'm fluent, or I'm intermediate in like 2 months or a month. So there's this kind of, I don't know how to put it. It's like when you go on Duolingo and you've got your daily streak, and you've got the league, and it creates this sense of competitiveness. And I do think that, like, from a lot of the stuff I've watched, it's kind of given me a sense of not urgency, but if I'm not doing it extremely efficiently, then I shouldn't be doing it. And I think that is unhealthy. Is probably a bit dramatic, but I think it unhealthy in a way, because they say slow and steady wins the race. There's nothing wrong with doing things quickly, and that's certainly my preference. I prefer to do things quickly, but I think as long as it's efficient and you're using the time that you do allocate well, then that's the main thing. Because obviously, if you're studying 8 hours a day, then you're going to make more progress, as long as you're really not wasting your time. So, I think, those are my current thoughts on pace. I think I probably just need to work my way up to being more consistent with my time. 3 hours a day would be great, but if I'm not even doing 1 or 2, then there's no point trying to run before you can walk, essentially. Anyway, the next one I wanted to talk about was motivation. So, I think this kind of ties into pace. I think that if you don't see any results, then you can lose motivation for that reason. But I think probably a bit of a non-conventional one I've noticed, for me personally anyway, is that when if there's something difficult, not difficult, but something not completely unrelated to language learning in life is not going very well, it can kind of I don't know, if I think about my Japanese progress and it's not going the way I want, it can kind of make me feel a bit more negative about it. I found that interesting. It doesn't particularly last long because I've kind of noticed it, but if other things in life are going great, I study my Japanese, and whether I feel like I'm progressing or not, I kind of just enjoy the experience. But I think that aspect aside, I do think motivation is very important. Everyone's got their own reasons for learning Japanese or learning any language whatsoever. So I think it probably like I said, it also ties into learning method actually, because if it's too boring, you're just simply not going to do it. Anyway, I'm going around in circles a little bit, going over previous items. The next thing for me is what to focus on, and this is one that's actually shifted quite a lot for me over the months. I haven't had a fixed structure at the moment. I'm thinking it makes sense for me to focus on new phrases and words, because I think you just need to learn a lot of words really to really be able to effectively use a language. I mean, you can learn the grammar points, but if you don't know the words, then you're not going to be able to communicate, and you also won't be able to understand what people are talking about. So learning words I've been trying to figure out how to effectively do that, and I actually gave Anki another chance recently, and I think I might have found a deck that may work for me, but we'll have to see on that one. Yes. Anyway, those are all the things I wanted to touch on briefly. So I suppose I could just run through my kind of trial week that I did. So I just started making notes of like what I did throughout the week. I didn't get absolutely everything, but I've kind of got most things, I think. So on Monday, during this week in question, I listened to 2 beginner podcasts and made notes. I drafted some basic conversations to be translated later and studied. I tested myself using, a testing website on 60 verbs. I got 30 out of 60 correct. Then I tested myself on 5 of the 30 using like paper and pen. Then I did multiple choice also. And then I did some work on keywords, which I deem to be words like but, if, because, therefore, things like that. On the Tuesday, I retested myself on the 5 verbs that I did by paper and pen on the Monday. I did initial learning for another 25 verbs that I got wrong on the website I use for the kind of self-testing, or one of them anyway, is called Decademy. So I like it because when you're learning a new word, you have to choose it from multiple choice, but then after that you have to produce it from your mind. You have to type it, and if you get it wrong, then you go back to the previous step where you have to pick it from multiple choice again, and it will give you an opportunity to try and produce it from your mind. So yes, that was Tuesday. And then what else did I do on Tuesday? I also did 7 minutes of listening and made notes of phrases that I'd like to learn. So that's handy, provided I go back and actually learn those phrases. And then also on Wednesday I'm not actually too sure what I did, and this is where things go a little bit pear-shaped, should we say. I did find the new Anki deck that I previously mentioned on that day, because I've made a note of it. On the Thursday, I had 2 language exchange calls. I usually enjoy those because I suppose I'm a bit of a social. I don't know. I enjoy learning socially, so if I can find a way to combine learning with being social, then I really quite enjoy that. It's quite fun. Obviously, if you get on with the people you're learning with, that's probably the the biggest consideration. On Friday, I did a little bit of Anki and Duolingo. I'm thinking going forward, I'm not going to count Duolingo unless I do like quite a lot of it, like half an hour, which I don't do very often. I got sucked into getting very competitive and going up the leagues, and then eventually I was just a bit like, well, who am I even competing with? I need to just do this at my own pace so I enjoy it. So that's kind of what I've gone back to with Duolingo at the moment. And then on the Saturday of the week in question, I did some Anki and some Duolingo, so not well one Duolingo lesson actually. So I really didn't do that much. Probably, it was probably about 35 minutes of study in total. And then on the Sunday, I didn't do my verbs, and I don't have any idea what else I did. So I guess it would be safe to assume not too much. So yeah, that for a week study, I don't I don't think that is really doing anything. So I really need to, I need to be more focused. I need to be more consistent. And kind of looking back at the week like this, it will be useful for me as a point of reference. So anyway, moving swiftly on. Despite all the things I've ranted about, I think consistently is definitely the main one. I do think one thing about me I've noticed, it's not a new thing either. When I combine two things that I enjoy, I'm more likely to enjoy them both more, to the point where I want to do what I want to do them, or finish what I've started. For example, Wagatabi. I did get stuck on Wagatabi, and when I got so stuck, I got a bit frustrated and went onto YouTube and couldn't find a playthrough. That's why I started mine. But anyway, to round off my point, I think it's quite possible that if I wasn't doing the playthrough, that I may not have finished. But I am glad I finished. But even though I've not learned all of the grammar points, I don't know all of it off the top of my head. I definitely did notice an improvement in Wagatabi with my reading. Like I said before, there was a point where I wanted to kind of solidify my hiragana and katakana knowledge. So at this stage, my hiragana is definitely stronger than my katakana. But I can write the kind of katakana characters, but I just don't see them as often. So I do notice that I'm slower at reading katakana, particularly for new words. But things I've seen before on Duolingo or on Wagatabi, like kohi, or that's the best example I can think of actually. Maybe teburu, I'm not sure. But anyway, I don't want to go too far off track. Another example of this that relates to me is, for example, I really enjoy cycling, and perhaps controversially, I prefer to cycle either listening to a podcast or with music, and I love music as well, but I typically don't sit around listening to music. I usually listen to music while I'm doing something else, either training or running or doing weights, or if I'm doing a certain type of like productivity, certain types of music can be good. So I think combining content which I enjoy making with learning somehow could help me be more consistent. So that's what I'm thinking at the moment. If you've got any tips and tricks that you use or enjoy to make yourself more consistent, or for learning in general, please feel free to share, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you.